and modern times. We are here to clarify the chaos and calm the confusion. My name is Erin Fugate. I am a doTERRA wellness advocate and a lifelong essential oil user. I absolutely love essential oils. I use them for everything. I also absolutely love science. And one of the reasons I got involved with doTERRA was because of their mission to blend the gap between Eastern and Western medicine, alternative and modern medicine. You could go to the next slide. We're so glad you're here, and we want you to know that we are striving to offer a nuanced, non-extreme side to this conversation with an effort to bridge the gap between Eastern and Western medicine. We collectively see a need for this in our communities, as so many doTERRA wellness advocates have come out staunchly on one side or the other. We are hearing from many people that are in the middle, who are still undecided and want to hear from medical professionals who can offer information that is not divisive or explicitly choosing a side. This event is for those who can see both sides and are looking for an open conversation, weighing all the options at hand. We are hoping this conversation will offer clarity and guidance and will help one make a grounded, informed, personal choice. doTERRA's original mission was to bridge the gap between alternative and modern medicine. And we hope that this webinar will continue with that same purpose. Whether or not you choose to be vaccinated, our goal is to offer you solid, evidence-based education so that in any case, your decision is a grounded and informed one. You can go to the next slide. So many of us have been wondering, tell us if you've been wondering the same, can I still trust science? Next slide, please. I got to my breaking point during this pandemic where I said, I'm not going to Google anymore. Google is not doing me any good. And I realized that I needed to go to trusted professionals. So I collected a group of people, and you will hear from many of them today. Physicians, aromatherapists, herbalists, doctors of Chinese medicine, nurse practitioners, and a few of my friends that are so good at producing events like this. And I said, let's come together and let's create this webinar so that we can have this conversation with people that want to. I want to introduce you to my beautiful production team and thank them all so much. We have Dr. Josie Schmidt, Ruth Gough, Andrew Gough, Jessica Travis, Dina Schwartz, Aisha Harley, Marty Hager, Emily Marin, and Spring Estep. Thank you all so much for helping to make this event come true, and I am so looking forward to hearing your presentations tonight. Next slide, please. So we want you to know that you are in the right place if you are searching for a balanced approach to combining Eastern and Western medicine. If you've been feeling confused or divided about current world events, and if you would like to be more confident in doing your own research. Let's dive in. Take it away, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Erin. It is an honor to introduce our first speaker, Dina Schwartz. She is a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist joining us live from Bend, Oregon. And Dana will be sharing her personal testimony and experience with the COVID virus. So take it away, Dana.
Thanks so much, Aisha. Thank you, Erin, for the great introduction. I'm just going to jump right in because we have such a full event of so much incredible information. And so I personally come from a family of Western Ivy League trained doctors, actually. I am the one sort of lone one that went off to the other direction, right? So I went into natural medicine. I went and really studied Chinese medicine, and then doTERRA came into my life. And so I want to give you a little bit of a personal health picture of who I am and through the doTERRA lens so that you can sort of start to think about yourself and think about how you show. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you. So many of you might recognize this pyramid, our health pyramid. This is my approach to health. When I first came into doTERRA, I was all about food as medicine. That foundational piece was key for me. This was something that I did before doTERRA. I've been in doTERRA about 8-9 years now. So this was something that was foundational for me. So I rate myself an 8 here. You see these numbers on the side. I rate myself an 8 here, and I'm super about food, but I go off, I make other decisions. I eat cheese. I'll have a coffee. I do things that are maybe not for my best self. Exercise has also always been pretty strong for me. It's also part of my mental health, right? And so yoga, I'm an actually certified yoga teacher. It's a huge part of who I am. Hiking. And this year during the pandemic, I actually invested in the Peloton exercise program to really take care of myself when gyms were closed, yoga studios were closed, and I lived in Bend where things are really cold. So I rated myself a 9 here. Now, rest and manage stress. This is something I've been working on for years, friends, right? I have some autoimmune in my system, in my family. I definitely, my mom, my grandmother, all of us have really wrestled with insomnia. And I have done everything from using all of our products, right? Serenity, Adaptive, our oils, diffusing, a weighted blanket. This has been something that I am focused on, but it's also a weakness for me. And so as COVID is, coming through our community, I'm starting to see my areas of weakness. Now, reducing toxic load is also something. For the last 8 years, twice a year, I do go through the doTERRA cleanse program. And this is how actually I personally started to view the vaccine as another layer of toxic load, and how can I approach this toxic load? Additionally, I got myself some great partnership with a functional medicine doctor. So I really gave myself a 10 in my proactive medical care. But let's look at what happened when COVID found me. Let's go to the next slide. So this is my timeline. March of 2020, I actually had one of my closest, dearest, oldest friends in New York City. I'm from New York. I'm a New Yorker. Get really sick with COVID before we knew much. We didn't know much about it. I also, because of doTERRA, have a huge amount of team in Italy. So I got to see COVID running through my community and my people early on. I was humbled right from the start. There was no question to me, is this real or not? I was like, wow. So then I also began listening and watching everything, joining Chinese medicine forums, right? Chinese medicine virus came from China. Chinese medicine has been tracking this and seeing how outside of the norm this virus was. Like everyone, like, wow, just absolutely humbled. And I want you to know, I listen to everyone. One of my main influences to actually go to Chinese medicine school is Christiane Northrup. So when I tell you I listened to everyone and everything, that is actually really true for me. Now, because my family are all Western doctors, they were first in line for the vaccine. My sister, who's working in California, she's an also integrative doctor. She was first in line, and she took actually an Adaptive capsule to go get her vaccine. She had so much anxiety around it. Personally, I was in a lot of fear as I watched every one of my family members take the vaccine. I was literally the kind of fear where you're like not sleeping and hoping that my family would be okay the next day, right? So I just want you to understand that was my experience of really, wow, what is happening? And I watched one by one, everyone be okay, right, so far. Then in April 2021, I realized if I want to see my father, my father has a lot of cardiac issues, if I want to see my family without them having fear between the two of us, I myself am going to have to take this vaccine. So that was my choice. No one in my family said, Dana, you need to do this. But I decided. So in April, I started to prep my body. So I already was doing all those healthy habits. And also Additionally, I just bumped it up. I bumped up my supplement routine. I cleaned up my foods. I took out those coffees and cheese. I did everything I possibly could to support my body. And in June, I did take the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Now, I'm a little unconventional, as you can start to see and hear in my story. And I was watching the global way things were moving. And I made a choice to actually wait 3 months till I took my second dose. And before that happened, we got infected with COVID. And I say we because I got it from my husband. And personally, because I have been very humbled from this virus. I wasn't going out. I wasn't doing any kind of events. But my husband has been, and he was playing music. He is a musician in the kirtan world, and he went to this event where 12 of us got sick. Now, there was only one person in that 12 that was fully vaccinated. He didn't get it. There were three of us that were half vaccinated and got it, but it got less than our dear friends who were not vaccinated. Everyone made it through, but 2 people were hospitalized. So it was like a little case study for me. And also, I want to say there are so many variables that contributed to that, which is why I wanted to start the conversation with my health profile. And each one of these people have an individual health profile. We also were here in Bend when the smoke was super intense. And now there are studies out from Harvard saying air pollution does contribute to the spread of the virus, right? And so my experience was that we felt well enough to actually help our friends who were not vaccinated during that time, go over there and help them, working with some nutritional therapy, the oils and things like that. So I have this 12-week recovery zone here because I think this is one of the most important things that I want you all to take away from. It's not just when you get hit with the virus or when you even take the vaccine. It is our daily deposits to health, our daily efforts that we make. And when we get better on the other side, we need to still keep that daily efforts, those daily deposits, right? Maybe we take a withdrawal out, we do, something not 100% in alignment, but then we put those daily deposits back in. And 12 weeks might seem like a long time to really bump up that care, but it's not. This is how we can really move through into healing, completely healing. So next slide. So I just wanted to share my experience, and I really want to say here that there is no right or wrong, and I really believe in individualized medicine, and we are incredibly blessed to have this team of people who understand that everyone's answer, my answer isn't your answer, and everyone's answer isn't. So I want us to all hopefully be here with an open mind, an open heart to take in beyond what we think we know. There's a quote from Einstein that says, "The only thing more dangerous than ignorance is arrogance." And so I believe that when we walk through health and when we look at medicine, it's a fragile atmosphere. And I just honor all of your health and all of your wellness. And I'm going to pass the mic on because we have a lot more science that I know you're here for. I'm available. So any questions that anyone has for how I use the oils, which were hugely a part of my experience, how I used our supplements, which was a huge part of how I prepped my body for the vaccine, absolutely, we are here for you. So passing it on, Aisha.
Thank you, Dana, so much. Our next speaker is Jessica Travis. She is a nurse practitioner from Windsor, Colorado, and Jessica will be discussing the fascinating world of essential oil research and will be addressing why the quality and credibility of our research matters. As a layperson, as we might all know, this topic can become really confusing. So we want to empower each of you on how to ensure that when you're doing your own research, your resources are credible and sound. So take it away, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for Dana for what you said about humility. So in line with what I have to talk about. I consider it an immense privilege to be part of this group, to present, the people that made it possible. I get a little emotional thinking about some of the inbox messages that come in through my inbox every day. There's an overwhelming sense of confusion, despair, anger, frustration, and hopelessness when there's a lack of clarity. And for me to be able to be a part of something that's going to contribute to providing clarity and confidence is part of why I do what I do. And I don't feel like there's ever been a time when it's more needed. So yeah, I don't want to get emotional, but so we can go to the next slide. Why research? For one thing, there has become an intense emotional energy around this whole topic. Okay, so real proper research takes the emotion out and it leaves us with useful data so we can make informed decisions. So we take the emotion out. Speaking of decisions, these are very important decisions. At times, this is life and death decisions. Far too often, comments are made which take very lightly the consequences of these decisions. And these consequences, I do believe, are becoming more and more real and more personal as time goes on. And I know we're going to hear more about that from the proceeding speakers, especially Dr. Gough. But as we see here in this chart, research, why? Because simply we don't know enough. And if anyone presents themselves to you as someone who knows it all, maybe that's because they've had a personal experience with this, or because they claim to have some special information that no one else has. Run. Okay. If anybody thinks they know everything and they tell you they've got it all figured out, you need to run. The people that you can trust are going to be the people that, like Dana said, freely admit that there is far more that they don't know than that they know. But they're in the trenches and they are learning daily, and then they're putting into practical use the information that they assimilate. That's the people you can trust. So being willing to admit that last little box, that there are things that we are neither aware of nor understand, takes a certain amount of humility. It takes a certain amount of levity. Yeah, there's things where we know about COVID. We don't quite understand everything about it. There's things we are aware of, we don't quite understand. There's things we understand, but we're not quite aware of. But then there's that unknown unknowns. And if anyone tells you again that they know that stuff, run. So this is something that, to me, that humility, that levity, that soberness. So we're not looking at this flippantly. I've even heard comments like, hey, everybody, let's just get it over with. I think the time for that type of flippant, attitude has gone by, because we're starting to see that this is very sobering. So we have a sense of responsibility to share with you the information that we do know. Okay, the next slide. So you might hear someone say, I've done my research, right? What does that even mean? Is there some standard that we can use? And what are some of the challenges that we run up against when it comes to research? Well, the first one is confusion. This is normal to feel, because there's so much volume of information coming at us, especially the more low level volume. And I'm not saying that the volume, that the information is low in it's just the quality of it is low, because we're finding it in places like social media, where you can find 100% contradictory pieces of data that both claim to be accurate. So in this situation, we need to avoid, I'm sure you've heard of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. We need to avoid the fixed mindset. That is where you say, I'm so confused and I refuse to learn. I'm confused is a dead-end thought. Nothing happens. In a growth mindset, you say, okay, this is something new. Doesn't make sense to me right now, but I can learn about it. I need to learn about it. I need to open my mind, my senses. I need to be alert, sort out the information, and learn so that I can do what I need to do. So there's that, the confusion. Literacy. You guys, we don't read. We are out of practice when it comes to read. The average American reads at about a 7th to 8th grade level. I mean, nothing against that, but we just are out of practice. So Research has found that a person's reading level is usually 3 to 5 years below the highest grade that they completed in school. And as of, I think it was 2017, Americans spent an average of 17 minutes reading per day, compared with 3 hours and 28 minutes watching TV, playing games, and using computers for leisure. So people don't read. Why is that important? Research is done by reading, and it's done by studying, and we're not reading. So there's that. Okay, and then readability. This is a problem because scientific data and research and even the abstracts, on average, they have a readability that's considered beyond college graduate level in English. So unless you have a college degree, it's going to be more difficult for you to read a journal or a research study and understand it. So that's called readability. So there's that. And then lastly, so then what do? If you don't understand, if you maybe aren't used to reading, if you look at an abstract and you're like, I don't know what this means, you tend to do what? Listen to the news, podcasts, YouTube, Facebook videos, your friends, your neighbors. And that's a problem because the vast majority of them are not doing proper research either. So then lastly, we have bias. What is confirmation bias? An easy definition of that is the tendency to process information by looking for, interpreting information that is consistent with what you already believe. This is a biased approach to decision making, and it's not any fault of your own. It's largely unintentional. But what happens is it results in inconsistent information. If what you're looking for is what you already believe, it's not going to lead you down the path to truth, which is what we need. We need true data. Okay. All right. Next slide. All right. So how are we going to approach proper research? All of that gloom and doom that I just mentioned, we do need to research. So we want to start broad and then dive into the specifics. Think about it this way. If we start at the leaves of the tree and we start with maybe, let's see, what is the efficacy of this latest pop-up treatment for COVID-19? That's where we start. Or maybe we start at, what is the best essential oil to use for supporting a liver transplant? I'm asking because this was a question I got recently. Those are like the leaves. We need to start at the trunk. We need to start by understanding basic information, like what is an essential oil? What is plant chemistry? What is COVID-19? How does it interact with the body? How does it make you sick? If we don't understand that stuff, we have no business being up here in the leaves and trying to understand this, like this abstract, way up here, advanced type of information. So because researching is such a big task, it can be overwhelming and hard to know where to start. There's nothing wrong with doing a basic internet search and going to places like Google or Wikipedia to start. They might not always be the most accurate, but you can orient yourself onto a topic like COVID or like essential oils. A basic overview, brief history, key points, start basic. Number 2, learn how to recognize a quality source. This is so huge, you guys. We're going to use an acronym called CRAP. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's easy to remember the acronym. Not every source is reliable. It's crucial that you can recognize good from not so good. You need to use critical thinking and analytical skills and ask, does the source agree with what other sources I have found say? Is it more than one person saying this? Is this person an expert in their field? Not a self-proclaimed expert, but an expert in their field. Who wrote this? Are they reputable? Are they a real person? And I'm not joking. Are they real? Are they a troll? Do they have a long history of commenting? Or maybe they kind of target troll on one subject over and over? Where was the article published? Can you find the same information in another reliable source? Please examine claims that you find in YouTube videos or social media posts, because they can be clickbait that spew out disinformation, and it's meant to prey on your emotions. They know exactly how to get you, and it's by emotions, and they know exactly the right trigger words, and they know exactly how to follow the patterns of your internet and Google searches and Drive searches to know what is going to trigger you emotionally. So don't buy into that, you guys. Be web literate and fact check everything. Okay, be open to verified information from several sources. The internet is a big place. I already kind of said this. You need to make sure that there's things that are just outright incorrect. And so you need to make sure that you have at least 2 to 3 different sources that will verify that it's true instead of going off of one web page. Okay, number 4, be open to surprising answers. This is part of that confirmation bias. Open up to the fact that what you were looking for might not actually be what you found. I've had to do this. I've had to correct myself in videos that I've done on information. If you have somebody who will admit when they're wrong, correct themselves, you can trust that person. This information is evolving. We're learning, so things are changing. And if someone can't come back and say that they were wrong and that information and learning has changed, then again, run. So be open to finding answers that maybe not what you expected to find. And then number 5, stay organized. It's hard when you're collecting a whole bunch of data. It can get really crazy and disorganized. So maybe have some PDFs or just keep tabs or make a project and keep track of, if you really seriously want to do research and not just say, I did my research, or just be talking on certain talking points, but seriously do research, keep track so that you can flip back and refer to when you're having an educated conversation with someone. Okay, so next slide will be that acronym of CRAP. So this is just an easy way to remember how to evaluate your sources. CRAAP, C is currency. We don't want to look at old stuff, whether we're looking at essential oils or we're looking at COVID. With COVID, this is so evolving so quickly that 2020 or 2019 is already old news. We need current data. Relevance, does it suit the purpose? Okay, accuracy, that's so important. Is it fact or is it opinion? It's really important to know whether it's just somebody's opinion. Are they giving references? That helps you to know whether it's their opinion or not. The author, are they an expert? Are they a real person? Do they have a bias? It's pretty easy if you try to set aside your own bias when you're reading an article to see if there is a bias. And then, of course, if you look at the author of the article and maybe they have some type of financial gain or funding with that article, that is going to give them a bias. So look for that too with the author. And then the purpose. Is the purpose of this source to inform, or maybe are they trying to persuade you, play on your emotions? Are they trying to sell you something? At the end of some of these, maybe there will be a supplement or something that they're trying to sell. Always look at those with a critical eye. Okay, next slide. So here's a good example. This is a personal favorite of mine. I was watching, I can't even remember how this came about, but Dr. Pimple Popper, I don't know if anybody of you guys watch her, but she's a dermatologist. And she was following someone else who mentioned the antiviral properties of essential oils. And she, on her Twitter, quickly tweeted, sorry, antiviral essential oils don't exist. Okay. Dr. Pimple Popper. And I was like, oh, no, she did not. So I was in her inbox. I was like, but this is a really good example of someone who is this is an MD. So do you think most people saw that tweet and were like, I guess you told that, plant lover, or that person that loves essential oils, there's no such thing as antiviral? Well, that's not true. So just because a doctor says something, it's one person. Can you find another source that's credible, like molecules journal, a reputed, well-reputable, very reputable, highly esteemed journal, scientific journal that's peer-reviewed, that clearly disputes, and there's multiple journal and research articles peer-reviewed that clearly dispute the fact, because there are antiviral properties of essential oils. It's well known, so she just doesn't know what she's talking about. So we have to be careful about things like that. Okay, next slide. Okay, let's go into scientific research. Now we're kind of learning about scientific research. Now, how do we know within scientific research? We don't all have to be super well versed in this, but it does help to know what kinds of scientific research are more hold more weight than others. So at the bottom you have expert opinion, and that could be Dr. Pimple-Popper. She's a dermatologist, so she knows, right? Not so much. She's down there at the bottom, and there can be people who have opinions and maybe some background information. Maybe they've had COVID-19. That's background information. Do they know everything there is to know about it? No. The information, if you look on the left-hand side, is filtered versus non-filtered. Filtered information is much more reliable. It's considered stronger because it means we can be confident that it is supports cause and effect. Unfiltered doesn't. Okay, so if you go up higher, you have case studies, cohort studies, which are like case studies where you look at certain people, but they go over longer periods of time. As you go up higher and higher, you get to the real meat, the quality systematic reviews that take different research studies and compare data from different sources and find that this data agrees with each other. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that type of evidence, and it's plentiful when it comes to essential oils. Thankfully for us, it's plentiful. So we can go to the next slide. I'm not going to get into all the definitions. I just wanted to show you a quick Google search. A really good source is Google Scholar. So if you want to find good quality peer-reviewed research, and if you want to start digging in and getting a little more meat, go to Google Scholar and put in a search like I did, essential oils antiviral. Did this today. 9,780 results for essential oils antiviral. One of them is, again, a great essential oil study about COVID-19 and therapy with essential oils having, guess what, antiviral properties. So we have research. You just need to look for it, and you need to know what you're doing when you look for it. Okay, next slide. So again, here are some examples of systematic review and meta-analysis. Remember that evidence pyramid? The top is the systematic review and meta-analysis. These are all examples of that. And they're talking about essential oils for anti-infective, for anxiety, for pain. They're talking about supporting your immune system. They're talking about real things that really matter. This is evidence that you can find when you do proper research. Proper research supports the use of essential oils for our health. Okay, lastly, we're just going to do one last slide. A word of caution about information that can be found on mass collection data sites like the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So this is a reporting system that is there for a reason. It's there so that people can follow potential adverse events after receiving a vaccine. But what are some of the limitations of this? We need to be really careful that we're interpreting the information properly from this type of data, applying what we learned from what we just learned about how to do proper research. So they say in their disclaimer that they cannot determine whether a vaccine caused something. The reports coming into VAERS are basically stating that the vaccine cannot be causation. They cannot prove causation for the adverse event, only that the event occurred sometime after a vaccination. So anytime something happens after someone's vaccinated and it's reported, it's there. Does that mean that it was caused by the vaccine? No. So does it mean that it could be? Yes. But it doesn't mean that 100% it was not. So that it did. So think about this. Unrelated deaths. So there's been almost 190 people, 190 million people fully vaccinated in the US as of now, as of late September. And there have been 7,899 reports of death following a COVID vaccination. That means that someone had a vaccination and that they died. But think about 190 million people. Many people in that number die every day. Death occurs daily. I'm sure Dr. Gough is going to tell a little bit more about that. But these can be coincidental and not causative. So we just have to be really careful of the way. There are also people that falsely report things to VAERS. There's no checks and balances on it. So people, for one instance, is a 2-year-old, false report of a 2-year-old that died from the vaccine was removed because it was completely made up. So people can make up and report things, and it takes a while sometimes to take them down. So this exists for a reason. It exists so that, like Johnson & Johnson, when there were extremely rare blood clots found after vaccination, when enough of them were found, it was pulled. And that's why we have this system. And when it works properly, it works very well. But we have to understand the limitations of it. And that's another application of how to do proper research. So thank you so much. I'm so glad that I was able to talk about research and how to properly do research, how it applies to essential oils, and how it applies to this current crisis. And I'm going to give the floor back.
Thank you, Jessica. That is so valuable. I just learned so much and really appreciate all that information. Our next speaker is Dr. Josie Schmidt. She is a naturopathic doctor, and she is joining us from Portland, Oregon. And Dr. Josie will be sharing key data and perspectives on the vaccine that we hope will help you in your decision-making process. Take it away, Dr. Josie.
Thank you, Aisha. Hi, everyone. Okay, I have about a 2-hour talk that I'm going to squeeze into under 30 minutes. So let's all put our seatbelts on. But before we do that, I'd like everyone to take a deep inhale and exhale. And I would like to dedicate this talk in love to the benefit of all beings. Okay. So my name is Dr. Josie Schmidt, and I am a naturopathic physician. And for those of you who are not familiar with what that means, I am a board certified primary care practitioner in Oregon. And naturopaths, we go through a 4-year medical training, just like MDs. We do all the same sciences and ologies, but we differ in 2 main regards. I kind of try to whittle it down. And that is in our core holistic philosophy about healing and the body and medicine, and also in our natural treatment options. Now, we take very seriously the first tenet of our naturopathic oath, which is first do no harm. And so I think this lens is the lens that people had in mind when they asked me to do this talk, because naturopathic physicians traditionally have not been pro-vaccination. They have not been anti-vaccination. We have been about docere, which is the second tenet of the oath that we take in naturopathic medicine, which means in Latin to teach. So we have always been about educating families and guiding them with the risk-benefit ratios in vaccinations and helping to really educate around them. For example, I want to give everyone a little bit of an example, and that's like in the past, naturopaths, we have definitely been critical of the adjuvants like aluminum, the preservatives like mercury or formaldehyde, and we've been critical of the intensity of the CDC vaccine schedule, and we have fought for alternate scheduling and single-dose vaccines. So I just wanted to kind of ground people in that's where I'm coming from when I kind of go over this survey of the information. What I would like to cover is going through the general ingredients in vaccines that people are finding questionable. And when I say vaccines, I want to be clear, what I'm speaking to right now is the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson. So the 3 vaccines that are most widely available in the United States. So those ingredients, and then the concerns, the adverse reactions and events, the data around that. And then I'd like to go into basically the current emerging COVID infection statistics. And then looking at all of that, looking at those statistics as to why these adverse event numbers that we first go through, why those are potentially seen as acceptable. And if we have time, weighing in looking at, you know, the idea of personal decision in a time of pandemic. And how do those things weigh out, and looking at this concept of, are you an island in our modern day society? So before I start, I would like to also just kind of lay as a baseline. I don't get to talk about the treatments, which is my favorite thing to talk about. So I just want to do a shout out to, we're going to be covering this and continuing to cover this, but whether you're talking about a vaccination or getting COVID itself, or any infection, my stance and most naturopathic stance is to have an active primary protocol before, during, and after an infection, or as I like to consider a vaccination is basically like an intentional mini infection. You are asking your immune system in your body to do something quite specific. And you treat it like it is a mini infection. And so you will be working to support your immune system, your nervous system, and definitely your digestion and your detoxification pathways, so that your body is doing what it needs to do to clear and clean what is going on as is working through a process. And as we'll see, one of the main things we're most concerned about with COVID is having an overactive systemic inflammatory response, one that is not appropriate. And so there are things that we can do in these primary active protocols to help support our immune systems and our bodies to be more stable and more balanced and potentially not go there. Okay. I'm just going to go on. If there's anything that I need to know, just someone put their hand up. Okay, I keep seeing things. Great. So, all right, I have a lot of notes, everyone. We're gonna see what we can squeeze in. So in the very beginning, well, not in the very beginning, last year in May, I had a naturopathic continuing education conference where at NUNM here in Portland at the university, the naturopathic university, we had a resident PhD immunologist give a talk, and it was fantastic. And she really helped ground, because she was one of my own, trusted the research coming in, and she really helped ground me with some of these basic concepts that we were even a little tenuous with back then. And so I want to help ground you. This is where it's starting with the vaccines. So this was a 2-day seminar, really going in depth. So when we talk about what Jessica spoke of, this was peer-reviewed, really solid information. First, that the mRNA vaccines, this mRNA technology has been around for decades. Well, a decade. It's been around for a decade. We have been looking at it it has been used with the Zika, the flu, and the rabies vaccines. They had known initially right away to work with the spike protein, because with MERS and SARS, previous infections that out, they knew they'd gotten that far. They had not gotten to successful vaccines. They knew to work with spike protein. They knew how to stabilize it. They knew that it was going to be, it would need to be protected with a nanoparticle. But what you have to know is, I know people were thinking initially, oh my God, it was so fast. How did they get this vaccine so fast? They never get vaccines that fast at all. Like, I can't trust it. this is an unprecedented global pandemic. So I have the, glory that my stepfather works with high-level medical artificial intelligence data collecting. And so I was hearing him and he was freaking out the whole time, like, this is unprecedented. The amount of conversation and globally the scientists that are coming together, the amount of money, the amount of scientists talking to bring this to the fore. That's why they weren't able for a decade to get something like a rabies or a Zika vaccine with this technology. They didn't have the money and they didn't have the sharing of technology. Guess what? Scientists don't share technology either. It's a bummer. Capitalism, I guess. So, right. But they are now in a global pandemic. This is how we got the vaccine. I just want to give that background. So what we knew was that the mRNA does not enter the nucleus of the cell. We knew that the body breaks down this mRNA and this the spike protein within hours. It does not hang around in the body. It does not affect or interact with our DNA. It does not have a live vaccine. The mRNAs do not have a live vaccine. Neither does the J&J. It has an attenuated, it's a viral vector vaccine, difference, old school vaccine. This mRNA is the new stuff, right? None of them have a live COVID vaccine. In everything we've ever known within science, shedding has happened only like maybe 11 times in other countries. Polio, think a long time ago, with live vaccines. And it's this tiny thing where there can be a small window of infectivity. It's an old concept that was regenerated and new. And what was that thing people say? Clickbait. So you need a live vaccine for shedding. And even when you do, it's like infinitesimal. Okay, let's continue. The mRNA vaccines and the J&J do not contain fetal tissue. They do not contain microchips or devices. They do not contain egg or gelatin, which made me happy, and very happily do not contain metals. So one of the things that naturopaths we were upset about in previous old school vaccines were these adjuvants of aluminum and something like mercury or formaldehyde as a preservative. Not in any of these vaccines. And J&J did not have any of this, nor antibiotics. And so they've had as preservatives as well, antibiotics not in there. And as a booster, the vaccine bottle stoppers are latex free. So that was kind of that take home of like, okay, maybe this new technology is cool. That's what I took away from it, as well as something else. The knowledge even from a year ago, what they were seeing in the trials with these vaccines were that we're having great T cell activation. So everyone talks about antibodies. Antibodies are the short-term thing that keeps us safe in our bodies that with vaccinations, they come and they go. Our long-term, most of it, long-term immunity has to do with T cells. And what they were seeing in the trials, and we're continuing to see, is the T cell activation with these vaccines was incredible. And they were not seeing it as much at the time, that's still up for debate, in the wild. I don't know the new data. I'm actually going to a conference in 2 weeks and I'm hoping to get that new data about what we're seeing in the wild in T cell activation versus vaccination. But what we do know is the T cell activation was incredible. All right, thank you, Jessica, for talking about VAERS. So VAERS is kind of like anyone, your neighbor hears a story about you, they can like put it in VAERS. There's car accidents, there's broken bones attributed to vaccination. I mean, there's a lot of things so VAERS is something that there's that kind of soup of information is in there. And then there's something called the VSD, Vaccine Safety Data. And that is 9 integrative healthcare organizations that work together with the CDC. And they look through VAERS and other reporting, and they identify and investigate possible side effects. Now, there's also a thing called CISA, the Clinical Immunization Safety Assessment. That's 7 medical research centers with vaccine safety experts all together. They take all of this data And then they really look at it. So can I have Emily, my graph? Y'all, I made a graph. Emily made it pretty. I sent her a little picture of my hand done scribble of the graph, and now we get to see the graph. So here is what I tried to break down for everyone about what we're really interested in hearing about. Sorry, I forgot one thing. I'm trying to go fast before we get to this, because what the anaphylaxis, see this first category, anaphylaxis. Now, what you need to know in COVID-19 in this incidence data, these are cases per 1 million. And you can see that the mRNAs, we don't have this data. I didn't have that. Just because it's blank, it doesn't mean that the data is not there. I'm just focusing in these spots, okay? So what you can see is the mRNAs, it has a higher incidence of anaphylaxis than, say, the flu vaccine, 1.5 there. It's a little more than double. But that's per 1 million. And anaphylaxis is usually connected to a lot the adjuvants or the preservatives. So the mRNA, we are definitely thinking the preservatives. So the thing that's actually of concern, I kind of told you about all the things that we are not concerned about or are not in the mRNA vaccines. The things we look at are the preservatives. And so in the mRNAs, both the Moderna and the Pfizer, the preservative is PEG, polyethylene glycol. This is the primary ingredient in laxatives and Miralax, colonoscopy preps. And then there's the J&J has polysorbate 80. These are cross-reactive. So if you're allergic to one, you might be allergic to the other. So what you want to know is that the CDC is very clear on this, that these, if you are allergic to these, this is a contraindication to their vaccine. And if you have a history of allergic reaction to any vaccine or any injectable, this is a precaution. And this is a strong precaution that they say you need to then work with your doctor. Now, we had Jennifer in the feed. I want to address this. She early on in the chat said, it sounds like she had a strong first allergic reaction and then it's really hard to say, it's French, Guillain-Barré. Anyways, I'm nervous too. I usually can say it. She had both of these reactions. I would say with her physician, this is an absolute contraindication to these vaccines, for this vaccine. And she should be able to work to get a statement with a doctor about that and be able to work with that. What I didn't plan on this to say is, in my mind, this is the person who should not be getting this vaccine. And this is the person that for the rest of us, if we can get it, we should be getting it to protect. This is the idea of vaccination, that those who don't have the indication want to be getting the vaccine, so we are protecting the people who cannot get it. So Jennifer, you have very good contraindication to this. Okay, so let's go on to this graph. So then we look at basically the big things that came in from all of that crossing of the VAERS and the vaccine safety data and looking at it. And what it boils down to is that for the mRNA vaccines, there is a safety alert on a potential adverse reaction, which is myocarditis. For J&J, there's a safety caution for a potential adverse reaction, which is thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, or I can't say it, I usually can, Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, in each of these three instances, they sorted through the data, they got cross-verification, these are solid numbers, and the FDA amended its EUA. What is the EUA? It's emergency use authorization. So currently, Pfizer is now FDA approved in the United States. The other vaccines are awaiting full FDA approval. They're still under what we started with, because it's a global pandemic, this emergency use authorization, okay? So when these incidences come in and they're verified, the FDA does respond. And it puts in this amendment. So let's go through them. Thrombosis with thrombocytopenia is a rare type of blood clot that in unusual places in a combination with low platelets. This is a kind of bleeding problem. And we see it mostly in women under 50. So this is one where that is a cautionary for women under 50 with potentially any of these blood disorders. I know someone who has had low platelets is wondering, it could be that you would think of taking the J&J. Now, let's go to Guillain-Barré. Guillain-Barré is a rare disorder of the body's immune system where it damages the nerve cells, causing muscle weakness. And you can have severe cases, can go to paralysis. Most cases recover. Now, again, they amended the EUA, and this was primarily seen in boys over 15 in the first 42 days following the vaccination. Now, as you can see, the numbers, the TTS and the GBS are quite low. They're almost in the range of anaphylaxis in terms of statistical relevance. When we look at myocarditis, it's up there at 67. Of course, I'm going to get to that big number of 450, which is the risk of actual myocarditis from a COVID infection. So you can see the relative difference in risk. Now, with this myocarditis at the 67%, the FDA amended its EUA, and there were some other countries and things that had some reactions. So let's look at that briefly. So myocarditis is inflammation of the heart. And the categories of main risk were, the highest was boys under from 12 to 17, and men under 40 was the second highest category. It was seen after the second dose, within the 7-day period. Take a breath for a second here. I want to then, within this issue of myocarditis, which is real, 2 examples of misinformation, I think, came up resulting from this. So the first was this reaction. So I had a friend who texted me and was like, oh my God, did you see the Nordic countries? They've banned the mRNA vaccines. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? I did some research. I went and looked. And in fact, it was not the case. What it was 3 Nordic countries were in looking at their own data. So they had an unpublished Nordic study that has gone to the European Medical Agency for assessment and looking at the CDC's assessments. Sweden and Finland decided to act on that precaution with the myocarditis, and it looks like their study is particularly focusing in on Moderna. So they're saying, hey, in this category of men under 30, we're seeing enough data that we are going to say, we're going to say you shouldn't take the Moderna and you should take the Pfizer. That was it. They're just acting on that information and making an advice precaution. Denmark looked at all the data and said, no, we're not going to act on it. It's not enough. We're just going to let people make up their own decision. These countries, by the way, have a much higher rate of vaccination than the United States. The second example is then this preprint that came out of Canada. Now, there was a preprint and let me say what are preprints. So no one knew what these were, because before COVID, the general Twitter and media online population did not care about scientific research that was put up on data boards before it was peer reviewed and published, which is what a preprint is. It's the initial data. They're putting it up for all of their peers to look at, i.e. peer review, and then it gets published if if it passes peer review. In this weird politicized climate that we're in, people are looking at preprint studies and blasting them into the internet. So this Ottawa Heart Association preprint came out claiming 1 in 1,000 people vaccinated with mRNAs had myocarditis. Oh my gosh, this went up. So there's a research thing called Altmetric, a company that tracks where published research is put online. They said this was the top in their top 5% of all published research data that was ever put out online. And it was shared on Twitter more than 11,000 times in the period of 1 week. Guess what happened the next week? The peer review looked at it, the peers, and they found a huge data calculation error in the math. And in fact, their math was completely wrong. And it was not 1 in 1,000, it was 1 in 25,000. And it was more in line with the data that we already have. They retracted the paper. They were like, oh my gosh, thank goodness for peer review. Thank you guys, and everything like that. Yay, vaccines was their stance. So there wasn't anything nefarious. No one like pressured them to retract it. So it's just a good example of what can happen when we are not checking our information. So then looking at this, I want to read these because these are 3 different ways of stating this data about the difference between your myocarditis incidence from an mRNA vaccine versus a COVID infection. So there's 67 out of 1 million would get myocarditis from the vaccination versus 450 out of 1 million. So you guys are probably reading this. I'll just go quickly. So this was males 12 to 17 were the highest risk category. They were even the highest risk category were 6 times more likely to get myocarditis from COVID-19 than from an mRNA vaccination. Your general risk of myocarditis due to a COVID infection, if you're a boy between 12 to 17, it's 6 times. If you're a woman like me in 40s and 50s, it's more like 30 times. Your risk is 30 times higher than getting it from the vaccine. Patients with COVID had 16 to 18 times higher risk of myocarditis than those without COVID infections. Okay, so I'm presenting this all because I've had different ideas about the vaccinations. I had to get my own education. When I start to look at this kind of data, it does start to make some of the concern, it relativizes it, right? To sort of see the difference. Now, I want to move us now into a different place. Moving on from there, let's see if I've gotten everything on here to, I think I'm finished.
Dr. Joseph.
Yeah, now this slide. Yes.
Can you just clarify something? There was concern that you misspoke for a moment, and I'd like you to clarify.
Oh dear.
Somebody said, Josie said 67% in error. It's 67 per million.
Per million, yes, 67 per million. So he says cases per 1 million, the numbers. So these numbers are all how many cases had this adverse reaction per 1 million cases. Or per 1 million people. So for 1 million people that had a Pfizer vaccine, 67 got myocarditis and 5 had anaphylaxis response. Hope that clears it up. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. So there is, I want to move on to what I'm kind of calling the concern, the current COVID infection data and why that risk, it is risk, there are some risks, is seen as potentially acceptable. So what we're seeing is from the, I had that up, the Imperial College of London found that half the patients hospitalized with severe cases of COVID were left with damage to their hearts. This was a study. And what all of this research that is on this page, this is kind of a encapsulation from one of them, but looking at a lot of them, it's this early research, and it's suggesting that 1 in 3 people will continue to have symptoms months after getting past the acute stages of COVID. I'm going to go very quickly, just talk a little bit about what's in some of these studies. So like there's a German study that looked at all the data, MRIs, all the things of 100 post-COVID patients and revealed that there was cardiac involvement in 78 of them. That's 78%. And ongoing heart inflammation in 60. Some of these people were asymptomatic. The average age was 49. 2/3 were not hospitalized. So, and this is independent of pre-existing conditions and severity. So what we're seeing in the medical community is this very agreed upon stance that these findings indicate the need for ongoing investigation of long-term cardiovascular consequences of COVID-19, and that it's very serious. There was evidence for pericarditis and myocarditis was found in a Spanish study of 139 healthcare workers who had COVID. About 10 weeks after the infection, the prevalence of pericarditis or myocarditis was 40% of those healthcare workers. So what we're seeing, what the medical community is seeing, is systemic inflammation is being seen as one of the main mechanisms for COVID's cardiac injuries. Doctors are seeing systemic inflammation that leads to leaky blood vessels. This is me kind of encapsulating it for everyone, leaky blood vessels, and then it leads to this edema. Now this can near and around the heart, and this leads to the heart activating its fibroblasts, which leads to fibrosis. This is the scarring. This is, some of these people were recovered from COVID. They didn't get very sick, that they're seeing this kind of scarring in. So what they're very worried about, and they're seeing too much indication of, that we could have potentially harmful inflammation smoldering in our hearts months after even a mild to moderate infection. They're definitely in moderate to severe infections, they're seeing it big time, and they're seeing it like they're not sure what's going on in the mild to moderate ones. They're seeing it sometimes and then not in others. Physicians are worried about those consequences leading to then heart failure down the road, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. And many cardiologists are convinced that these heart issues are a component of long haulers' symptoms, the symptoms like fatigue, shortness of breath, chest tightness, and heart palpitations. And if you've been looking, there's definitely also, this isn't like sick people. They're looking at the college athletes and the professional athletes. And there have been many high profile cases of collegiate athletes and professional athletes showing myocarditis after COVID-19 and not knowing it. They were scanning all of the collegiate athletes for this, and now they've had any kind of COVID infection. Now they've moved it to they're only doing the MRIs and really scanning if someone's had a moderate to severe infection. But the professionals, they're definitely, and they pulled one of the Red Sox pitchers, and he didn't even know it. So I also so this is speaking to just this COVID is intense. And so when people asked me early on what I was going to do personally, after I gathered some of the early data, and I had one of the doctors in this even spoke to, and he compared COVID as a post-viral syndrome and similar to Lyme, and that he suspects there's going to be a similar dialogue around COVID-19 as was Lyme, and like certain doctors believing it and certain ones not. I kind of saw this early on, and I'm someone who has worked with myself post-viral syndrome, and that's been the main thing I've worked to heal myself with and from. And I became, with just this kind of information, it became clear to me that I was much more afraid of COVID than I was of the potential small adverse reactions from the vaccine. That my body's ability has already shown itself to go into post-viral reaction and has an autoimmune tendency. I definitely was like, oh yeah, I don't know what it's going to do with COVID. I'm very healthy. I try to be very healthy, but wow, I don't know. So that is definitely something to start weighing and looking. And that's what we always try and do as physicians, is help people to weigh the cost benefit ratios, right? So I hope I'm helping you today. What I want to finish with is really, it's a little intense. It's kind of like, where are we today? And here's where we are in the data that we know today. And it kind of, in my mind, speaks to this other thing that I wrestled with, which is like, I believe in personal freedom, in medical freedom. I like to help people weigh that for them and their families, you know, but in the time of a pandemic, it's different. You are not an island. What you do does affect other people and the rest of the world, whether it's your parents and a loved one, someone that you care about who is immunocompromised, and you want to protect them, or it's the people who are stocking your grocery shelf. It's the people who are, if you go to the gym, who are the janitors who are working, you know, keeping that place going. Or if you travel, if you're going in an airplane or loading all the bags onto the airplane and keeping that place going, our actions affect them. So that definitely also has worked into my calculation. And I think it's something we all should be looking at. Now, where we are today is that Delta now makes up more than 90% of the new COVID cases. Since July 1st, there's been a 700% increase in the weekly average for COVID cases. That's a lot. 1/3 of COVID infections reported in May were in young people aged 12 to 29. And what's happening is because we're seeing that older adults are now vaccinated, becoming more vaccinated. So we're seeing the rates of infection coming down into children and young adults, like 1/3. That's huge. That's not where we started out. We have now eclipsed the Spanish flu death amount. I don't know the death toll, which they estimate to be 675,000. We are now over 700,000 death toll in the United States with COVID-19. 100,000 of those were in the last 3.5 months during this highly contagious Delta variant. There were 2 studies published in the, it's called the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report by the CDC. The first study was published, it was September 3rd, and it told us that the weekly COVID associated hospitalization rates among children and adolescents has risen nearly 5-fold. And hospital admissions among children and adolescents were 4 times higher in states with low vaccination rates as compared to states with high vaccination rates. On September 10th, a study was published where with data that was collected after Delta became the most common variant, and it shows that unvaccinated people have 5 times greater risk of infection and more than 10 times greater risk of hospitalization and 10 times greater risk of death as compared to those fully vaccinated. Since mid-June to October 4th, right? June to October 4th, Florida has suffered the most deaths of any state at 17,000 deaths. Texas has had the second most deaths at 13,000. And even though these states only account for 15% of the population, they have had 30% of the COVID deaths since we crossed the 600,000 mark in that last time period. I'm going to take a quote here from Dr. David Dowdy. He's an infectious disease epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins who analyzed the data and said that at least 70,000 of the last 100,000 deaths were in unvaccinated people. And those who were vaccinated with breakthrough infections, the majority were found to have caught the virus from an unvaccinated person. So I just want to say that, you know, this information is what has been coming in over the summer, and it is intense to hear. It has to, like, this idea of having herd immunity and really getting us up to this place is one of the best arguments for that is about the variants. So variants are wild cards, and vaccine researchers understand this, and as long as people keep getting infected, new variants will appear. Variants of concern we don't know, but they may be transmissible as this Delta, more transmissible. They may cause more severe disease, and they may be resistant to both vaccines and even the antibody therapies, the monoclonal antibodies. I haven't even got into the like how expensive monoclonal antibodies are. And if everyone who's getting COVID, we just treated them with monoclonal antibodies, we couldn't. That's a whole other conversation. We know that fully vaccinated people with Delta have breakthrough infections, but these breakthrough infections, and that they can spread to others, right? So we know this, but what the data is showing us is that people who have breakthrough infections tend to be less infectious for a shorter period of time than an unvaccinated person. And you can say, well, that's so what? That's not a big deal. It actually is a really big deal when you're talking about variants, and when you're talking about the length of sickness and the ability of transmit really matters when you're talking about the creation of a new variant, and you're talking, it's a numbers game when you're talking with a population of billions, because this is global. So these are things that have been emerging recently over the summer, these kind of statistics. And I was going to go into more, but I know I have to wrap up. I'm way past. So the last slide, Emily, if you want to bring on, here is my references for people want to take a screenshot of this. I don't know if you, or we can be giving it to people. These are some of the reports where I have actual numbers and working from for people to be guided from them. We're going to continue on. We have so much more. I know it was kind of a Debbie Downer ending, but I think that's a little bit of where we've been over the summer. And so I tried to bring in a lot of the different aspects that I myself have wondered about with the vaccination and making decisions and worked with people. So I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Josie. Next, we're going to just keep moving because we have so much more to cover. So please stay with us. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Andrew Gough. He is an emergency room doctor joining us from South Dakota, and he is going to be sharing his personal experience working in the emergency room through this pandemic, but he's also going to be sharing all that we can do to prepare ourselves, how to support our immune systems, and how to protect ourselves in the case we contract COVID or any of the variants. I'm going to hand it on over to you, Dr. Gough.
All right, hello, and thank you all for joining us. What an awesome experience we're having so far. Thank you to everyone who's contributed so far, like such amazing information. Thank you. So as Alicia said, I'm Dr. Gough. I'm an emergency physician, and I'm going to be a little raw with you right now. This has been a really rough year. COVID has presented a challenge like I've never seen before, simply because we've never had a disease process which we knew so little about, which had such devastating effects, multiplied by the fact that we do know that there's some very simple things that people can do to mitigate this infection. Yet despite that, we are seeing so much needless suffering and death, which is just emotionally draining. I know multiple colleagues who are retiring, who are cutting down just because of the draining stress that they're under because of the COVID load, which we've been seeing in the hospitals. That said, like I love my job as an emergency physician. I find it so impactful. Being able to educate and help people, that's really why I became a physician. And so with that in mind, I kind of want to go into a few things that we can do to be a little more wise in how we approach COVID. All right, so let's hit the first slide, please. So a big question I'm often asked is, should I be tested? I don't want to just add to the statistics. I don't believe in COVID. And the short answer is yes, absolutely, get tested. When should you get tested? Whenever you have a concern that you might be infected with COVID. Let's have the next slide. The reason for that is because 50% of community transmission was from asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic cases. That means that because someone didn't know they had COVID, they were out in the community and they were spreading that disease to other people. Think about what would happen if people knew that they had COVID and were able to act appropriately, stay home, isolate, stay away from others. That spread of transmission would go down drastically. And people keep asking me, is COVID going to end? Are we ever going to see the other side of COVID? And I believe we are. It's only a matter of time. But how we respond will either prolong that time or shorten that time. And all of these things we're going to talk about are going to help us reduce that time that COVID's going to last. That's a slide. I share this picture with you because this is a patient I had recently, which really struck a chord with me. They weren't much older than myself. They were pretty healthy. They were seen in the clinic September 3rd. They had some mild COVID symptoms, and so they wanted to get tested. They tested positive. They had a chest X-ray to see how things were looking, and as you can see from this chest X-ray, looked pretty good. All right, not too bad. They were offered monoclonal antibodies. They didn't want to do that. They weren't vaccinated. They went home to kind of just manage the symptom process by themselves. Let's have the next slide. This is the same person 2 days later. All right. This is a drastically different chest X-ray. Let's have a slide so we can do a side-by-side comparison. So with 2 days, this is the change that this patient experienced. And what I saw clinically was a patient who was short of breath, difficulty breathing, could not maintain their saturations above 70% without high flow oxygen. They had to be admitted. And another heartbreaking thing that's happened is because they got behind the ball in treatment, they've really suffered. They're still in the hospital. Last time I checked on Wednesday when I was there, they've been intubated. They've now got a tracheostomy. They're starting to do better, but I mean, this person's going to have lasting effects. And this is what I want to prevent. This is what we want to stop. So the next slide is going to be, how do I protect myself? This is what everyone wants to know. And I believe it isn't a simple east or west. It's a layered approach. So let's have this slide. How we protect ourselves is going to be a layered approach. Can we go back one? I think we might have missed the slide. Perfect, there you go. So it's going to be a layered approach. And this slide really is one of the reasons why, as a physician, I partnered with doTERRA. Because when we look at a healthy lifestyle, it isn't just a one thing. It is about utilizing things from multiple areas to help support a healthy lifestyle, the foundation of which is going to be eating right. Now, one thing I hear as a physician on the web is that a lot of people question why physicians aren't telling the truth about the benefit of nutrition. Well, nothing can be further from the truth. Let's have a slide, please. From the very beginning with COVID, WHO and the NIH were talking about the power of supplementations, how to really maximize their health using nutrition. Now, the best way to get supplements or to get nutrition is to eat a healthy diet, making sure you're eating plenty of healthy leafy greens, vegetables, coniferous vegetables, fruits, legumes, grains, making sure you're maximizing your diet. And then using supplements to really maximize the daily intake. Some powerful supplements that the NIH were talking about from the very beginning, let's have a slide, were vitamin C. Vitamin C plays an important role in your immune system. It also has antimicrobial and antiviral actions, which act on immune system modulators. It's going to help maintain the epithelial integrity and enhance the differential and proliferation of B cells and T cells, enhancing phagocytes, normalizing cytokine production, and really helping to support your immune system. Interestingly enough, vitamin C deficiency has been shown to impair immune function and increase susceptibility to infections. So how can we maximize our vitamin C? Obviously, eating leafy greens, eating citrus fruits. Strawberries are a really good source of vitamin C as well, and doing some supplementations. Can we have the next slide? Vitamin D is another powerful supplement, which was talked about at the early stages of COVID. We know that it helps to improve absorption of calcium to help have healthy bones, but vitamin D also plays a role in immunity. It can help to viral replication. It suppresses inflammation. Again, it's going to help to increase T cell regulation, and it's going to be really good at helping both the innate and the adaptive immune system. And again, we see with vitamin D deficiency, it's going to affect the body's susceptibility to infection. So how are we going to maximize our vitamin D? The best way is the sun. Get out in the sun and enjoy the sun rays, helping your body to really maximize its vitamin D. All right, omega oils can be good as well. Egg whites are also a really good source, and supplements. Can we get the next slide? The final supplement I want to talk about is zinc. All right, zinc is involved in numerous aspects of cellular metabolism. It's necessary for approximately 100 different enzymes, and it really plays an important role in both the innate immune system. It also has antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties. Zinc is another important supplement which we want to have in our bodies. All right, zinc can come from meat, from legumes, from nuts, from seeds. But probably the best thing which I like to recommend to people, if I could have the next slide, please, is doTERRA's Lifelong Vitality. And the reason for this, when we are looking at healthy immune system, when we are looking to really maximize our body's health, it isn't a short-term approach. This should be something we do daily as a daily habit to really maximize our body's ability to process whatever comes its way. I highlighted a few things which is I find interesting. With the supplemental facts in the Microplex VMZ, you are getting 200% of the daily recommended value for vitamin C, 100% of vitamin D, and 130% of zinc. That isn't by accident. These are powerful supplements to help support your body. Now, another thing to kind of highlight the importance of vitamins, if I can have the next slide, or nutrition. This is from a study which looked at lab values of people who are admitted for COVID to try and find some correlation between lab values and severity of disease. And as you go through the things which I've highlighted, potassium, sodium, vitamin D, iron, these are all things which we can control with diet. And as we go from mild to moderate to severe, we see increasing amounts of deficiency or abnormality in the lab values. Again, for me, this highlights the importance of making sure we're maximizing our nutrition, utilizing supplements. If I can have the next slide. The next study, from the same study, which was prediction of COVID-19 hospital length of stay and risk of death using artificial intelligence-based modeling, they found something which is really incredible, which I want everyone to make sure you keep this in the back of your mind. If I could have the next slide. They found that the risk of death was 78.2% for intubated COVID-19 patients who had not used anticoagulant medication. 78%. All right. So how can we lower that? Well, they found that intubated patients and dexamethasone medications had zero risk of death from COVID-19. Now, this is a study, when I see zero, I get a little skeptical. But I think when we look statistically, there is a statistical difference between 78% and zero, and there's definitely something into that. So if you ever have someone who you know who is hospitalized with COVID-19 and is intubated, make sure you're asking the physicians the question, are they on any type of anticoagulant and are they getting dexamethasone? All right, two important things which I want to take home and want to make sure that people are asking to make sure that they're maximizing their chance for improvement. If I could have the next slide, because this is a great topic which a lot of people have been asking me about ivermectin. It's a big buzz, so let's just talk about it really quickly. And we've already heard about this can kind of, if we get them too early, we don't get the full results of the study. So what do we know about ivermectin? It's an FDA-approved antiparasitic drug. It is safe at approved doses, which is typically about 0.2 milligrams per kilogram. We also know that it's been shown to inhibit the replication of SARS-CoV-2 in cell culture. So that sounds pretty good, right? That's going to make headlines. We should start using ivermectin. No, absolutely not, because there's a but, a big but. And that is the pharmacologic and pharmacodynamic studies suggest that achieving the plasma concentrations necessary for the antiviral efficacy detected in vitro would require the administration of doses up to 100-fold higher than those approved in humans. Because of that increased dose, it basically takes it from that safe zone to that dangerous zone. There's a saying in toxicology that the difference between medicine and poison is the dose, and that dosing is important. So if I could have the next slide, let's talk about why we see, or one of the mechanisms of actions that we saw with COVID-19. I love this diagram because it kind of teaches some important things, all right? We have our SARS COVID virus, and the infectious part, the bit that is going to cause infection is inside the virus itself. It's the yellow part. On the outside, you have the spike protein. The spike protein acts like a key that unlocks the ACE2 receptor, allowing it to get into the body. And they were hypothesizing that ivermectin helped to interrupt that connection between the spike protein and the ACE2 inhibitor. All right. Now, a quick side note, because of what we've been hearing about shedding of the virus. It's absolutely true that years past, when viruses used a weaker strain of the virus or a live virus, that there was potential for shedding because you're utilizing live virus. mRNA vaccines do not use live virus. What they do is they actually teach your body how to recognize the spike protein. That's what's being produced by the mRNA vaccine. And it's teaching your body to recognize that spike protein so that the T cells, the B cells, they can identify it and the phagocytes can destroy it, all right? The spike proteins are not the infection. They are literally the key that lets the infection in. And if you only have the key, there's no infection. So vaccines do not result in infections of COVID, and they will not lead to shedding. In fact, I've had multiple people come into the hospital with, symptoms and saying I've got some chest pain and some respiratory problems because of shedding, and they're afraid that they've got, they got the virus from someone who they were in contact with. And when we do antibody testing, they've tested positive, not because they've had the vaccine, because they've had COVID and they were just asymptomatic, and now they're experiencing that long hauler syndrome, which was talked about. Now, let's go back. When we look at this principle of a key and unlocking the door and trying to block it, there's a better way. If I could have the next slide. I love this study, which was, I've talked about this quite a bit. It's the COVID-19 and therapy with essential oils have an antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and immunomodulatory properties. Now, the bottom line is this. Eucalyptus was shown to be incredibly powerful at blocking the spike protein, at blocking the ACE2 inhibitor, and blocking viral replication. It's also been shown to have protective properties for the lungs, helping to prevent the cytokine storm and development of ARDS. It also talked about multiple other constituents which are found in essential oils like peppermint, melaleuca, clove, cinnamon, rosemary, and oregano. And so when people ask me what are some of my favorite essential oils to use, eucalyptus is one of them. But as you look at how I've separated these oils, eucalyptus, peppermint, melaleuca, that's found in brie. Eucalyptus, clove, cinnamon, rosemary, that's found in On Guard. These are blends which I've been using every night and throughout the day just to help promote protection against COVID and other infections and viruses in the home. What else can we do to help prevent our chances of being infected or severity of infection? If we could have the next slide. We have to talk about the monoclonal antibodies. If that individual, which I talked about at the very beginning, had taken the monoclonal antibodies, we could have expected a 50% reduction in their chance of going on to developing severe respiratory issues from COVID. All right. And, you know, this is from Sanford. Sanford is one of the largest healthcare systems in the Midwest. This was published on September 14th. And it just goes to show how effective the monoclonal antibodies can be. All right. But again, this is just another simple layer that we can use as we protect our bodies. If I could have the next slide. Want to talk a little bit about the benefits of vaccinations. If we could go back one or two, please. All right, looks like one or two slides we've got cut out. I apologize. So first off, let's just talk about the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. In the ambulatory and in inpatient care, coming from the New England Journal of Medicine, they found the effectiveness of full messenger mRNA vaccinations after 14 days of the second dose was 89% effective at preventing hospitalizations, 90% effective preventing ICU admissions, and 91% effective at reducing or preventing emergency department and urgent care clinic visits. All right. Vaccines have been proved drastically reduce the severity of COVID-19. All right. That's the science. All right. I included this study because, again, a lot of people, and it's been brought up, they say that a vaccine came out too quickly, that they can't trust it because of how quickly it was rolled out. First off, know that the mRNA technology has been around for years. This is just an application of that technology. Second, every vaccine has to go through a journey of multiple phases of clinical trials where they take a small group, make it bigger and bigger, and they're looking for reactions. And just know that as the FDA was looking at the vaccines for COVID, they went through this exact same process like every other vaccine. If I could have the next slide, I want to talk about some myths super quick, because there are a lot of myths going around about COVID-19 and their vaccines. So first off, COVID-19 vaccine alters DNA. It doesn't. All right, we've already heard mRNA does not enter the nucleus of the cell where the DNA is. It doesn't interact with the DNA at all. It will not damage or change the DNA. Myth. It isn't safe because of a quick rollout. Again, like we just said, it still went through the appropriate standards and trials. Myth. Food, allergy, immunocompromised, breastfeeding, or pregnant people can't get the vaccine. Well, fact, these people can get the vaccine. Now, as we've heard, is it safe for all people? I wouldn't say that. There are some people who it may not be the best idea for. And we've already had a great example of the Guillain-Barré syndrome. I had a sister-in-law who had Bell's palsy when she had the first dose. Now, she had it previously and it was a re-flare-up. And she called me up to ask what my opinion would be to getting the second dose. And as we talked about it, it took a couple months for the Bell's palsy to clear up the first time. And so that's what we're expecting it to do with this flare-up again. Knowing that the severity of the Bell's palsy really was the paralysis, and knowing that the COVID-19 can cause very severe health issues, the decision was made to go ahead and get the second one, knowing that Bell's palsy isn't going to get worse. Maybe it might get longer, but it's going to protect against much serious health issues.
And the good news.
Right. And the good news is, after getting the second vaccine, it cleared up. All right. I'm not saying it was the vaccine, but it might have just been, it ran through its course and it cleared up. Now, another myth. I get COVID-19 from the vaccine. I think we already put that to bed.
Or from other people getting the vaccine.
Right. And can you get it from other people getting the vaccine? No, you can't.
Does the vaccine shed and cause?
Because it's not going to shed. Myth. I've had COVID-19, so I don't need the vaccine. It's actually being shown that natural immunity net length isn't quite as well documented as the vaccine immunity. We know that with vaccines that they're good for at least 6 to 8 months, because that's how much data we've got so far. All right, and they also provide greater protection against different variants. Another myth is no need for mask or social distancing after vaccine. No, okay. When we talk about health and wellness, we're talking about a layered approach. The more layers of protection you have, the better protected you're going to be. And so keep wearing that mask. All right, let's move on because we're getting almost out of time, and I want to respect your time. Let's have this slide. Now, I put this slide in because it's important to know, and it's already been said, that there are about 189 million people who have been vaccinated to date. I see a lot of, in the hospital, I see a lot of people who come in and they talk about some reactions that they had when they had the vaccine. So one of the most recent ones I had was a mum who came in with her daughter who had a spontaneous abortion. And they were saying it was because of the COVID-19 vaccine that they had received. And so obviously, like as a physician, I wanted to look in, like, well, what is the research? What does the research say? I love the New England Journal of Medicine. This one came literally yesterday, and it had an article about the receipt of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines and the risk of spontaneous abortions. In the research, they looked at the average or the prevalence of spontaneous abortions in the general population, and it's about 16 to 22% in the normal population. 16 to 22 people, or 16 to 22% are going to have a spontaneous abortion. When they looked at the study and they compared spontaneous abortions that were happening in pregnant women who had the vaccine after conception or in the first trimester, they found that spontaneous abortion rates were about 18%. And so does spontaneous abortions happen after the COVID vaccine? Absolutely it does. But does it happen at a higher rate than the average population? It doesn't, all right? And that goes to show, again, the difference between causation and correlation. Having 189 million people vaccinated would suggest that we now have 189 million people who are now more susceptible to things. We should see the rate of spontaneous abortions go up. And you can take this example and apply it to other issues. I hear a lot of people's concern about developing cancer from the vaccine. Well, good news, guys. The rate of cancer has not gone up significantly. Finally, if we can just go to the last slide for time. I want you to remember this picture. This is what we're trying to prevent. How you prevent it is completely up to you, but it needs to be a layered approach. For me, it was doing daily habits of utilizing lifelong vitality to really maximize my supplementations, maximizing nutrition of my body. It was exercise. It was managing stress. It was making smart choices when I'm at work. I'm utilizing On Guard. I'm utilizing Breathe to kind of really help protect my airway, to keep my body healthy. If I've had a particularly rough day, I'm going to take On Guard Plus as well to really, again, utilize the gifts of the earth as much as I can to help support my body. And if I get COVID, you better believe that I'm going to start doing a whole lot more. I'm going to get the monoclonal antibody. I've been vaccinated to reduce my risk. And I'm going to be looking to more natural solutions, things like turmeric to help lower the inflammatory rates, things like copaiba, again, to help reduce the inflammation that I know can come from the cytokine storm with COVID. How you choose to protect yourself is up to you. But I just hope that as we go through this seminar, that it's going to give you some good ideas and principles to help you make a good choice. Thank you so much for your time, guys.
Dr. Gough, thank you so very much for both this presentation and secondly, for all that you are doing in the field. We really appreciate you. Okay, big breath. So we have 2 more presentations to go. We are running a little tight on time. We're going to go a little bit over, so hopefully you can stay with us. If not, we will be sending out the recording, but we still have more valuable information to share. So it is an honor to present our next speaker, who is Dr. Gough's wonderful, beautiful wife, Ruth Gough. She is a clinical master aromatherapist. She is a yoga therapist and a functional nutritionist. And she is going to be speaking on a very poignant topic titled Behind the Mask, Unmasking Your Own Truth in Times of Uncertainty. So Ruth, go ahead and take it away.
All right, welcome friends. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you who have taken the time to be here with us tonight, or who are taking your precious and limited time to watch this on the replay. I think that the conversations that we're having are very important, especially at a time like this. But the way that we're having them, the way that we're interacting with one another, the way that we're speaking to one another, the way that we're treating one another is so incredibly important. And I know that you have probably experienced the same thing that I have over the last 1.5 to 2 years, where I've noticed that it seems to be that the divide is getting greater between sentient beings, between individuals, between people who once loved and respected one another, divided over issues that frankly we are all in together. We are all facing together. And I'm so excited. The ladies are actually going to be announcing something really special that we're doing at the end of this session. So please hang on with us, because this is something I honestly have been given so much hope and inspiration and excitement about. We are so excited to have a community of individuals who have different ideas about the same problems that we're facing, who believe differently or have different information, but have the ability to come with respect and love, holding space for one another, and being so respectful of one another's positions and places, understanding that Dr. Gough, for example, right now, has some pretty strong emotions and opinions, right? This is a man who is the most happy-go-lucky, if you know the color test, like pure yellow, 100% yellow, fun-loving genius of a man, right? And in the last 2 years, I have seen him carry a burden that has woken him up with night terrors. First time in 20 years that we have been together, he's had night terrors. He has come home from work and had to excuse himself so that he could go have some emotional time alone before he was ready to come out and be the type of father that he wants to be. And so his presentation was clear. In the chat, there was a lot of people who had some things to say about that. Dr. Josie Schmidt, someone that we are so blessed to have presenting with us. Jessica Travis, every single person that's been here today have shared of their experience of wonderful things that they have to share. And I would like to applaud those who have really worked hard to stay open, to have an open mind and an open heart, and be willing to hear what everyone has to say, even if it maybe is a little bit different than what you yourself have heard or experienced or felt, and who have been brave enough and kind enough to respectfully share your ideas and opinions. And that is what is going to be so important as we go forward. But I think that if we could just take a moment, and this is not what I was planning to do tonight, but I think that this is what needs to happen. If we could take a moment to just sit for a moment, like just sit for a moment and notice what it is that we're feeling in our bodies. And notice what it is that we're experiencing in our hearts and in our minds. And with clarity that comes from the awareness of what it is that we are experiencing, notice whether your experience is something that you want to propagate, something that you want to continue to share with yourself and with the rest of the world. Are the feelings and emotions that are inside you right now what you want to get up from your computer or your device that you're watching this on today and go out and share with the people that you love most? And if the answer is yes, that is wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you, like most of us, have been impacted over the last 2 years, not just by the pandemic of COVID-19, but by the pandemic of separation, of division, of unkindness, of just bitterness, of illusion, right? The illusion that we're not all in this together, that we are not all on the same team. The idea that this is only a physical crisis that we're going through, when really so many of us are facing a pandemic of magnanimous proportions emotionally, some financially, right? Some spiritually, some relationally. We are all going through things, and we can show up for and be present for one another. And so I'm going to save the rest of the information that I have for you guys, because I want to be so respectful of your time. And I have so high regard for the woman that you are about to hear and listen to tonight. I love every single person that you have heard from tonight. I have so much respect and love for all of them, just as I have for each of you who have chosen to take your time to come here with an open mind and open heart and share of your energy and your knowledge and understanding. But Aisha is going to do a wonderful job of introducing our final presenter. And as she does so, I am just so excited for us all to hear from her. So with no further ado, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that self-inventory. Is the way that I'm showing up online and interacting with people the way that I want to feel and show up in the rest of my life? And going forward with that, with so much gratitude in our hearts, let's take a deep breath and move to our next presenter.
Thank you, Ruth, so much. Thank you. Okay, yes, it's time for our next and final presenter. And once again, it is such an honor. All of our presenters have been incredible, so knowledgeable. We really hope that you are taking value and great information away from this webinar. And as we've mentioned, we will have a follow-up Facebook group for continued conversation. So without further ado, it is an honor to introduce Spring Estep. She is a licensed practical nurse. She is in Bluntville, Tennessee, and she is going to guide us through how to create our own COVID preparedness kit. So we want you to leave this webinar feeling empowered. We want you to feel prepared, and we want you to feel protected. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Spring.
Aisha, thank you so much. You all, hi. Well, this has been a long webinar, and thank you so much for carving out time on your weekend and in your evening and spending it with us. We are a group, a collaborative group of people who just want to give a voice to maybe other views and other information, and maybe things you've never heard, or maybe you've just kind of been like, I don't know how to break this down, or I don't even know how to understand what I'm reading. And so we came to you in this space and said, we're going to give you information. You can do with what you want with that information, but we also want to give you a good foundation. We are living in unprecedented times, right? We are living in, I just said to my husband yesterday, can you believe that we are almost 2 years into this? Like, it feels so crazy, right? That we're in this time, and it's been almost 2 years of our life where we're trying to dissect information constantly. And so in this, what I'm going to talk to you about, I want you to know our heart in this is really for you to walk away from this and say, okay, I feel more empowered to understand information when it's given to me. I feel more empowered to take what I know that I have at my fingertips and make a healthy space for me and my home. And I know how to take care of myself. So next slide. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your COVID preparedness bag. And I was like trying to figure out like what that would look like in my mind. And then I thought, how about a Black doctor's bag? That feels appropriate. And then I was like, that doesn't feel appropriate, but whatever. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like. Next slide, please. You all came to this presentation because you are craving more knowledge. You want a better foundation. There's a lot of information out there and you want to know what the biggest nuggets are. Your brain has this incredible capacity to retain so much information. But we need to make sure that the information that we're putting in there is legitimate, good, solid, well-researched, good info. Next slide. So one thing you need to remember when you walk away from this, the most important thing, and we've said this numerous times, is that foundation, that layered approach. You guys, you're here because you are involved to some degree with a wellness company, right? I mean, we all have been touched by doTERRA to some degree. We all also bring to the table our lives, which maybe don't have anything to do with doTERRA before doTERRA, and maybe you're just kind of touching oils. So you need to look at how you prepare for any illness, whether it be COVID, whether it be the flu, whether it be strep throat or the stomach bug, or just a little sniffle. You have to look at this as a layered approach. Any foundation of a building has got to be solid for you to be able to have a building that stands. So when you look at this picture, do you see what I see? I see like a lot of different things that are the foundation. I see rocks and I see dirt and little twigs and I see big beams. There are numerous things there. And that is exactly how you need to take care of yourself and have this preparedness bag. Numerous things go into this. Next slide. The one thing that I think is most important is that this approach that we are sharing with you towards your wellness, towards healthcare, it takes a team effort. It takes multiple people in your life, not necessarily just a doctor, but a community. It takes a whole group of people coming together and helping you and helping us support our health in different ways. I was raised in a very non-traditional wellness home. My mom was very into nutrition. She was a product of the 70s and I called her like a first generation hippie, and she exposed us to all the things natural. In fact, I became a nurse because I told my mom that I was going to show her that she was wrong. I became a nurse because my mom had lost her marbles and I would tell her all the time, we need to be in a different home where I can get a prescription, you know, because there ain't nothing wrong with taking us to the doctor. And she was so adamant that she treat us with natural things. I became a nurse and very quickly I saw that maybe my mom was not completely wrong. And we all love to admit that, don't we? Like, as you get older and then you kind of look back and you're like, oh my gosh, my parents weren't completely crazy. It really kind of deconstructed my core in how I was trained in medicine, where I was like, okay, there is two sides to this, but it's a team approach. And so what I've seen over the years, I've been a nurse for a long, long time, is that it really is a team approach. Next slide, please. Your home needs to be ready for when threats are high, not just when you get sick, okay? So we've heard from Jessica Travis, we've heard from Dr. Josie, we've heard from Dr. Gough, we've heard from these people who have said to us, like, you need to be able to have tools at your fingertips. So what does that mean? Now, take doTERRA out of it. Let's talk about the zinc. Let's talk about the vitamin C. Let's talk about the vitamin D. These are all things that you should have for that foundational thing in your home, along with your other routines. Managing your stress. We have talked so much in a lot of our doTERRA education stuff about that wellness pyramid, like the wellness structure there. So are you eating right, you guys? Are you consuming food that is going to help nourish your body and to help build you up? Because when threats are high, you need more nutrition. You need better nutrition. The time to not change your nutrition is not when you're sick. It's before that, right? So part of having your readiness bag is having that good nutrition approach as that foundational thing. Manage your stress. We're all stressed. Are y'all stressed? I'm stressed. Good grief. And I don't even feel stressed. I'm that personality that just doesn't ever feel stressed. I feel stress. Stress is going to cause your immune system to have to work harder. It has to flex its muscles even harder. So manage your stress. Are you moving your body? Or are you just sitting and being a keyboard warrior all the time? You guys, listen, get out of that space. Move your body, do these things so that layered foundational approach is there. So when threats are high, you are not going to succumb to that as easily. All right. So make sure that you have plenty of vitamin C on hand. We're going to offer you guys a group that you can join after this, and we can talk about like good sources of vitamin C and all of that later on. I'm just going to give you some bullet points. Okay. Vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, all of those things are things that you need to be able to have access to or already have in your home. Next slide, please. And then one of the most important things, you guys have all seen this kit, right? This is the Healthy Habits kit that doTERRA has. And I love this because this is the other part of that foundation. We've got like the rocks and the twigs and the mud and the big sticks. And this is like the big rocks in our foundation. This is going to help support you. Our lifelong vitality. Listen, if you don't have lifelong vitality, get a supplement, a nutritional supplement that is going to support your body. You guys, you cannot pour from an empty vessel. You can't make withdrawals. Dana talked about making those little daily deposits. You can't make a withdrawal if you've not made a deposit. A good nutritional supplement, we all choose Lifelong Vitality because it is so good for us, is going to be key in making that strong foundation. Terrazyme and PB Assist should be part of your daily protocol. And this is why. Your gut, 70 to 80% of our immune system starts in our gut, right? So if we're not taking care of our gut by giving it those good digestive enzymes and that good probiotic, then our immune system is going to already be weakened when threats are high and we're exposed to things. So we really need to have that in there. And then I love these oils that come in just this kit. And these are just simple things. Like if you need a good visual of what you need to do, just look at this, remember this. Obviously frankincense, immune system, emotional health, all of that. Lavender, same thing. Lavender helps to decrease those cortisol levels in our body. And when those cortisol levels are elevated, we are more prone to get sick. So this is what we need. Balance, grounding, emotional, lemon, detoxifying, cleansing, On Guard. Dr. Gough talked about using On Guard and Breathe every single day. It has that vital eucalyptus and the rosemary and all of the things in it that we need to help keep our body strong. Deep Blue Rub, let me tell you something about Deep Blue. I'm obsessed with it for COVID stuff. You know why? Because if you rub it all over your chest, if you're coughing your lungs up, guess what? It helps. It helps with your symptoms. Did you know this? Oh my gosh. When they released the Deep Blue stick at convention, I lost my mind. I literally lost my mind because that COVID stick or that Deep Blue stick, COVID stick, that's what I'm going to start calling it, is the COVID stick. But that Deep Blue stick is so good for cough and congestion. Deep Blue Rub, same thing. Rub it all over your chest. The oils that are in it are not only going to support your body for painful cough, but they help to break up secretions. One of the huge issues with COVID is the inflammation in the lungs and those secretions, and coughing up is very hard. So having just this as part of your foundation is going to shift your health positively. Friends, listen. The time to have a preparedness bag is not when you're already sick. Be wise, be smart, have it ready now. So many things that you can do. And the other thing is the On Guard chewables. Are you guys loving those? The hard thing for me is I want to eat them like candy. So I'm like constantly just putting them in my mouth. It's not really a chewable though, right? It's kind of like an On Guard rock candy. So you just got to put it in your mouth and like suck on it for a little while. Because if you chew that sucker right off the bat, you might break a tooth, and we don't want that. But you need to be using those all the time because they are so good. They have the zinc and the vitamin C and the vitamin D and beta glucan, which is incredible for your immune system and helping to regulate blood sugar. There's so much. Next slide. So I just want to close with this because we're running out of time. But I want you guys to remember that when we are dealing with threats, whether it's COVID or whatever, you're in this world because you have been touched by this natural wellness community somehow. But then we also have this other big world of modern medicine. But I want you to know the reason that I love doTERRA, the reason that I'm passionate about what I do with doTERRA is because it is a marriage of the two worlds. It's bringing Eastern and Western medicine together, natural and modern medicine together. And in that world, we are able to cohabitate. And I am so grateful for that. When you're looking at your COVID preparedness bag, when you're looking at your health in general, don't be caught with your pants down, right? Like get your stuff together ahead of time and don't be fearful of modern medicine. You guys, we live in 2021. Are you kidding me? We should be extremely grateful for modern medicine. 100 years ago, they would be bleeding us out somewhere, right? Like this is modern medicine. The science is incredible. We can have both worlds. We can have modern medicine and natural medicine meeting together and having a good balance of both because you know what? We need both. Next slide. So I have just a couple of things to sum this up. For you to have a preparedness bag, you need to dig into some true research and turn off all the other noise. Start doing that research that Jessica talked about where you start following the links and you really start doing reading. You guys, you have to do the reading. Don't just read the headline. Don't just read the first 2 sentences. Really read all the way to the bottom and start comparing things. Part of the noise that you feel and why you don't know how to be prepared is because everything feels angry, right? Where it's like, blah, everybody's just like angry. Listen, turn the noise off and spend some quiet time, put some balance on, put some adaptive on, and just start reading. The second thing is you need to have a care team in place now. The time for you to establish yourself with a provider is not when you are sick. You need to pull people into your life for that multi-person approach. Pull them in now and just say, here is my heart on this. I am hesitant to have a doctor and I need to find somebody who can be a voice for me. A lot of the fear that people feel right now when it comes to COVID specifically and going to the hospital when they're sick is because they are not familiar with a provider. They don't have somebody who can help be a voice for them. Listen, doctors don't want to kill you at the hospital. I'm just going to throw that out there. They are not trying to eliminate the population by getting rid of you when you're sick. You guys, it doesn't work that way. I'm an ER nurse. We want to keep you alive. That's our goal. That's what we want to do. And you need to have a care team, people that can be in your corner and help you come up with a plan of care, things that you would like to use, things that can help you stay well, and then be a voice for you when you are sick. But don't wait until you are sick. And the other thing, the last thing that I'm going to close with is you need to create a consistent routine in your home. Consistency is key. If you are doing things consistently in your home with your oils, with your supplements, with other products that you use, then when threats are high, you will be very well prepared. Your body will be prepared. Your body won't be shocked by you trying to all of a sudden throw the whole dumpster at it. It will say, okay, we were prepared for this. be consistent in your home. The consistency will help you to be successful in getting that readiness bag ready. Remember, you should already be putting things in there that you're consistent with using now so that your bag is well stocked and your body is not shocked. All right. You guys, thank you so much for the time. We have some big fun stuff for you next.
Thank you so much, Spring, and all of the presenters. That was incredible information. I think Furhan just said, now I have a lot of questions. That's the sign of a good talk, a good webinar, a good presentation. If you leave that webinar with curiosity, more questions, and you want to chat, you want to talk more. I mean, I immediately want to get off this webinar, and I'm going to probably call Spring and Aisha and Dr. Josie, and I'm going to text Ruth and Jessica and Dana and Marty and Emily. And I have so much that I want to say and I want to ask. We knew that this is how you were going to feel. And we feel the same way, even more than just chatting about this webinar. Aren't you craving a community of people who are open, curious, who want to find valid research, who want to explore alternatives, who want recommendations about where to get their zinc or their vitamin C, want ideas on how to find a doctor who's going to support them? Don't you want to be surrounded with doTERRA essential oil lovers who also love modern medicine and science and want to find a way to use both? Well, that's why we've created this Facebook group for you. And we invite you, since you attended the live webinar, or if you have watched the recording, we invite you to join the Facebook group. It is one of the requirements. You will be asked a question, and it's just the honor system, but you will be asked, did you watch the webinar? If you watched the webinar, you can come into the Facebook group. It's totally free. The group is facebook.com/groups/EO Science. If somebody would put that in the chat, that would be great. We'll send it out in the post webinar email as well. When you get into the group, there is a pinned welcome post. We just want you to introduce yourself so we can start creating community and get to know each other. Now, pull out your calendars, because for the week of October 25th to October 30th, we are going to have Facebook Live presentations. Casual, just people talking about so many of the things you brought up in the chat. I mean, I couldn't keep up with the chat. There's a list of questions that are over 500 different people have put in questions. So we have so much juicy content to pull from to fill that Facebook group with lives for that week. So October 25th through October 30th, be sure to tune into the Facebook because we'll have a bunch of lives. Now you're going to get an email later tonight that will give you the recording, and it will be available for 7 days. You can share that email with family and friends. You can spread that recording out wherever you want. It's going to be live and available until October 25th. Then I'm going to take it down. And I'm going to take it down, for various reasons, sensitive subjects, all of those things, but also we just want to have the action happen now so we can all get in the Facebook group and continue the education. We have plans to offer more of this. So if you liked this, if this is the kind of education you want in regards to essential oils, in regards to holistic living, to natural wellness, we have more. We're planning to do one about mental wellness. We're willing to take your requests. Tell us what you want to hear about, and we will pull more professionals, more physicians, more experts to come and give us this really balanced education where we learn how to live our life using the best that nature provides and the best that modern medicine and science provides. I think that's my last slide, right, Emily, or did I miss something? Perfect, yes. We're grateful you took the time to learn with us today. We hope you feel confident with your decisions going forward. And most importantly, we want you to know that you're welcome here. No matter if you got the vaccine or you didn't get the vaccine, if you slather your body with rose oil or you prefer jasmine. It doesn't really matter. We love you. We want to connect with you. We just ask that we all be respectful and honor each other's choices and opinions and ideas. So if that is you, join us on Facebook and join our growing community. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you to all the presenters. It was a fabulous evening and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye everybody.